Hey guys, it's Dane at ZIMM'S Guitars. A very special guitar to show you guys today. It's a Max Baranet. Come on in, let's look at this. All right, so I've got Paul down here with me today, and he knows a lot about this guitar, a lot about Max himself. So what are we looking at? Come on inside real close here. Let's take a good look.
All right, so we will A/B this and match it against what Gibson is putting out right now for the 1959 reissue Les Paul. But this is a replica. All right. Now here's the difference between a replica and a fake. A replica is built by an artisan for a private customer and is not perpetuating the fact that it is a Gibson guitar. This is basically a work of art. The artisan that builds the guitar makes the difference. You see Gibsons all over the place, you see fake guitar makers, and then you see artisans and custom guitar makers that were making approximations of historic guitars during a time when the actual manufacturer couldn't replicate the guitar, and that brings us to two names that are most important in Les Paul's resurrection, and that is Chris Derrig, may he rest in peace, and Peter Max Baranet. Now, Max is what we call him now so that we don't confuse him with Peter Max. Here's the quick story. He ran a place called Image Guitars in Los Angeles and was building replica guitars for famous clients, some of whom include Edward Van Halen and a certain guy named Saul Hudson, who we all know as Slash. As the story goes, Slash was dealing with B.C. Rich and other guitars during the time he was recording Appetite for Destruction. He didn't have any really good guitars that he was happy with. Guns N' Roses manager, Alan Niven, said, I know a guy who can build you a guitar that will approximate what you're looking for, which is the holy grail of all guitars, the 1959 Les Paul. At the time, in the late 70s and early 80s, Gibson could not replicate the 1959 Les Paul. They'd made a couple of attempts with the KM series in 1979. You've probably seen, if you're a fan of these guitars, the KM79. It was not spec correct. It was not period correct. In fact, the body shape was incorrect as well. The pickups were aftermarket. They weren't replicated PAFs. And so they tried to repeat this mistake with the Heritage series. All of these guitars were production levels of what were special run guitars for special guitar shops. Long story short, Chris Derrig starts making replicas. He passes away in 1987, doesn't actually live to see the fame that his guitar would go on to attain. We'll talk about that later. And Max Baranet continues to make replicas of Les Pauls. They become very highly sought after. Max has a couple of different things that he thinks make up the essential of a Les Paul. A, it's the age of the wood. Very old mahogany is what he likes to use, or was using. He hasn't made guitars in a long time.
Are you thinking like 100-year-old?
100-year-old Honduran mahogany is usually what he preferred to use. So the mahogany, the species of wood, and the age of the wood are essential to the sound of this guitar, replicating a 59 guitar. Also the way it's cut, the way it's manufactured, the shape of the guitar. Now, this guitar and Max's jig, which is what they use as a blank to cut out the shapes of the guitar, this is based off of Pete Townshend's 1959 Les Paul. So nowadays, Gibson can computer scan a guitar like they do now for the R series, and I'll explain that a little bit later on when we show you an R9. But back then, you actually had to carve the top and the shape from an original, and that's what Max did. He went over it inch by inch and replicated the shape of Pete Townshend's 1959 Les Paul, which is what this is based off of. Then he gets a good slab of maple, also aged and cut to the right dimensions, and puts it over the top. Then you have to use period correct glues. Now here's the deal. Now Gibson is using hide glue, but back then they were using formaldehyde and things that were now not environmentally safe. But that was essential in the construction. This guitar was based on the exact same materials that they built the 1959 Les Paul with. All of the tuning keys, all of the pegs, all of the, if you look at the mother of pearl here in the logo, obviously putting the Gibson name on it is somewhat of a trademark infringement. It's interesting that Gibson would turn a blind eye to both Chris Derrig and Max Baranet because they weren't making guitars like this at the time, and they weren't going to put through the expense or the time, the labor intensive that it would take to build one of these. The slab of rosewood is aged and dark and
Brazilian
beautiful.
rosewood.
Brazilian or Honduran, depending, but usually Brazilian. Brazilian is the best quality. Then you look at the fretwork in here. The fretwork is perfect. Now, we will show you, you'll notice that the fret nibs are almost invisible. That's because in 1959, the binding on the neck did not go way up over the frets. It was much thinner, and we'll show you a 59 reissue that will verify that as well. Max also was a big fan of the pickups. Normally PAFs would be in there, sometimes custom wound, sometimes people would swap those out. And then of course, the finish, the painting, the lacquer that was used. This one here, you know,
Nitrocellular?
Nitrocellulose. It takes about
Cellulose.
Yeah, nitrocellulose takes 8 coats to do. And that means it takes about 8 days because it takes about a day for every nitro finish to dry before you can put a second coat on it. So each guitar takes about 8 days just to paint, much less all the cutting and all the manufacture that goes in it. Obviously, the old Switchcraft toggle, CTS pots are 500K, and my guess is Max used PIO capacitors in there, which is paper in oil, which they don't use anymore, except for on the historic series Gibsons. But that's what they were using in 1959. He's got the thumb bleeders on here, the old nickel bridges, ABR1. These are, at the time, the only way you could get a 59 Les Paul that was close to period correct was by going through Max Baranet. He hasn't made guitars in a long time. He doesn't like to talk about what these guitars are worth publicly, but I will tell you, if you buy a 2019 Gibson R9 59 reissue historic VOS, that will cost you anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000. Expect to pay anywhere from 6 to 7 to 8 times that amount for one of these on the used market. They are very, very pricey. They're very, very rare.
So maybe starting at 20 grand or something.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find one for 20 grand, I would buy it. They are going for more than usually, anywhere from 30 to 50, depending on who you talk to, you know, the provenance of the guitar, who might have owned it before you. And that's the difference. The difference is, you know, there are a bazillion guys that make replica guitars, but you can buy somebody's paint by numbers version of it, or you can buy somebody who made it famous. And that brings us to the fact that Slash ended up originally with 2 Max Baranets and 2 Chris Derricks. At one point, Slash was high up for drugs and money, and he took one of the Max Baranets and put it into a pawn shop. So somewhere out there amongst the world is a Max Baranet replica Gibson Les Paul 59 copy. Somebody owns it. We don't know who. That left.
And there's a chance they don't know that.
They don't even know. Yeah,
They think it's a 59.
it's funny because let's face it, the Max is as sought after now as most real 59s. There are people that own real 59s that if they get the opportunity to buy a Max, they're like, yeah, I want that, even though they own a real 59, which is worth $500,000. So one of those is out there in the wild. Good luck trying to figure it out. That left Slash with 3, 2 Chris Derricks and 1 Max. The guitar that made the Les Paul re-famous or as part of the rebirth was originally the Max, but the Chris Derrick is the one that's in the video that has now become the template for the Appetite for Destruction guitar that Gibson sells right now. So the most famous signature Les Paul guitar is based upon a replica Les Paul guitar that Gibson never made. And so if you are looking for a 59 Les Paul, as close as you can get to period to correct at the time, made by an artisan, that is very, very rare to find. Max Baranet is what you're looking for. And again, he hasn't made guitars in a few years. He won't make guitars now. He's apparently retired. And we'll see what happens. But is this one for sale?
Yes, it is. But this one was manufactured approximately 15 years ago? Okay.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
The neck and body have been sitting around for quite some time before he put it together.
I gotcha.
So, but it wasn't put together and painted till 12, 15 years ago.
All right. So real quickly, the finish on this thing has not faded. It doesn't, that's the other thing, is this hasn't faded like a lot of the 59s have. This still has a beautiful blend of the cherry, heritage cherry sunburst, fading into orange gold, fading into yellow. This and a beautiful book-matched figured top.
There is one thing that I had him not do.
Which is?
Put the pick guard on it because
Yes.
of that top. I did not have him screw the pick guard.
No pickguard hole.
which is interesting because, you know, that's the whole Les Paul pickguard versus no pickguard argument. In this situation, no pickguard. This is, I mean, you know, this looks like the guitar that everybody wants to see Slash holding. And so Slash doesn't use pickguards, this doesn't have a pickguard, and it doesn't have any of the holes drilled for it. So everything else on the guitar is fairly immaculate. And again, looking at the binding, and we'll show you an R9 to compare and contrast. It's very thin, the fretwork is great. The fretboard on this thing is actually nicer than what Gibson is putting out right now. And as I said, your 59 reissue Les Paul will cost you anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000. This will cost you anywhere 8 to 9 times that amount, if not more. And so just by comparison, this is a Gibson 2019 60th anniversary 1959 Les Paul VOS reissue. Is that enough? Did you swallow that? And if you notice, this has faded. It's called Faded Iced Tea Burst. They make up all kinds of burst names for them. But if you look at it, compare this fretboard to the fretboard on the Max Baranet, and it's not even the same. That thing is much deeper. It's richer. You look at the inlay work, and don't get me wrong, the inlay work on this is beautiful, but there's a difference between the custom shop and a custom artist building a guitar. And as we lift this out, you look at that neck, look, see the fret binding?
The little nibs.
The tiny little nibs, mini nibs, indiscernible from what Max did. He did the exact same thing, built it exactly the same way, exact same tuners. If you didn't know the difference, you wouldn't know the difference. In fact, Max's wood is a deeper stain of cherry, his mahogany, but it's one piece of mahogany. And you go back, if you want to swing back around over here, the figuring on that top is nicer than what the Gibson Custom Shop is putting out now.
Yeah, it's got a lot of this color around the bottom.
But even when you look at the flame maple on here, see how tight that flaming is?
Tiger stripe.
You come over here, and this is an actual Gibson, and this is a piece from their custom shop that is nowhere near as flamey as the word will be used. But this is also supposed to be aged. That is not. That is naturally aged. And so there's the difference. And again, I guess the Max is for sale, so if you guys want to buy it, contact ZIMM.
I'll put a link in the description.
Yeah. Has the thumb bleeders too, which is great. For those that don't know what thumb bleeders are, it's a little pointer, it's a little piece of metal here that when you try to change the volume would cut the side of your thumb if it was cut too sharp. This is not, these aren't very sharp, which is good.
Well, it's not every day you get your hands on an expensive guitar like this. And it's not every day you get to play a 1959 Gibson Les Paul, but this is about the closest thing. The guitar plays, and it looks, and it feels great. Thank you guys for watching.